It was a normal Monday morning in the emergency room of City Memorial Hospital. Nurses moved quickly, doctors shouted orders, and patients waited in long lines with worried faces. In the middle of this chaos, Nurse Angela Reyes was working her shift with her usual calm and steady way. She had been a nurse for almost 12 years and had seen everything: accidents, heart attacks, pain, panic. But something about that day felt different. Angela was making her rounds, checking patient charts and giving instructions to the new trainees. She was tired, like always, but her heart was still in the right place. She didn't just see patients, she saw people. And it was during one of her rounds that her eyes fell on an old man sitting quietly in the corner of the waiting room. This man looked like he didn't belong in a busy hospital like this. He was thin, his hands trembling slightly, wearing an old, faded military cap. His coat was too small, and his boots were worn out. He had no one with him, no family, no friend, just a small backpack on his lap. Most people would not have even noticed him. He was quiet, not demanding attention, not groaning or shouting like many others. But Angela noticed. Maybe it was his eyes. They looked tired, not just physically, but tired of life. She walked past him at first, then paused. Something pulled her back. She looked at his chart. His name was Henry Collins, 78 years old. He had signed in almost 2 hours ago with chest pain and dizziness. But the ER was full, and he had been pushed back again and again. Angela frowned. Chest pain in a man his age was not something to ignore. She walked up to him gently. "Mr. Collins?" she asked softly. The old man looked up slowly. His face was lined with deep wrinkles, and his eyes were slightly cloudy, but there was a quiet strength in them. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice dry and weak. "Are you okay? You've been waiting a long time." He nodded slowly, trying to be polite. "I'm used to waiting. I waited in the jungle for rescue once, 3 days straight." "This ain't bad." Angela gave a soft smile. "You're a veteran?" "Vietnam," he said proudly, tapping his cap. Angela's heart squeezed a little. Her grandfather had also served in Vietnam. She remembered the stories, the pictures, the medals. But more than that, she remembered how little help her grandfather got when he came back. How people ignored his pain, both in body and mind. "I'm going to help you," she said, more to herself than him. But Angela knew the rules. As a nurse, she could not perform certain treatments without a doctor's order. She couldn't run tests or administer medication. All she could legally do was triage and monitor. But Angela also knew time was running out. Henry's hands were icy cold. His skin was pale. These were warning signs. She looked around. The doctors were overloaded. The head nurse was dealing with a trauma case. Nobody would notice if she stepped out of line for 5 minutes. She walked quickly to the supply room and grabbed a warm blanket and a digital monitor. She came back and wrapped the blanket around Henry, kneeling beside him to check his vitals. His blood pressure was dangerously low. His pulse was irregular. Angela's heart jumped. This man was in danger. He needed help. Now. She flagged down a young resident doctor and explained the situation quickly. The doctor, distracted and stressed, said, "Put him in line. There are 10 people ahead." Angela took a deep breath. She knew what would happen if she waited, so she didn't. She gently helped Henry to his feet and led him to an empty bed in the back corner of the ER. She connected him to the monitor and started an IV to stabilize his pressure. It was a risk, a big one, but she couldn't stand by. As she worked, Henry gave her a tired smile. "You remind me of someone," he said softly. "Oh yeah? Who?" "My nurse in Nam. She saved my life too." Angela blinked fast, trying not to get emotional. "Well, let's try to make it 2 times, okay?" It wasn't long before the shift supervisor found out. One of the aides had reported that Angela had moved a patient without proper clearance. Angela was called into the admin office. She stood quietly as her supervisor, Ms. Grant, frowned at her. "Angela, you know the rules. You bypassed triage protocol, moved a patient without doctor approval, and administered treatment unauthorized." "I know," Angela replied honestly, "but he was unstable. He had low blood pressure and signs of cardiac distress. He would have collapsed in the waiting room." "That's not your call," Ms. Grant said coldly. "We have procedures." "For a reason." Angela nodded slowly. "Yes, but sometimes procedures are too slow. He's a veteran. He deserved better." The supervisor didn't flinch. "That's irrelevant. We have to treat all patients equally, and we cannot have staff going rogue. You're suspended for 3 days, effective immediately." Angela said nothing. She just walked out of the room, her steps heavy, her heart heavier. No one said anything as she collected her things. A few fellow nurses looked at her with silent support, but they were afraid to speak. In a system like this, standing up could cost you everything. She left the hospital and sat in her car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. She had always followed the rules, always played it safe. But not this time. She didn't regret what she did, but it still hurt. Being punished for doing the right thing was not something they teach you in nursing school. At home, she couldn't sleep. Her mind kept going back to Henry. Was he okay? Did he get the care he needed? Did anyone know he was a war hero? Or was he just another old man, forgotten and alone? She made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window watching the street. A part of her was angry, not just at the system, but at the world. How had society come to a point where saving someone quietly made you the villain? Little did she know that just a few hours later, someone very powerful would walk through the doors of that hospital, and everything would change. But for now, in the quiet of her living room, Angela didn't feel like a hero. She felt tired, confused, and sad. Still, deep down, she knew she would do it all again. Angela didn't expect the phone call that came to her just after her shift ended. The voice on the other side was firm, official, and carried a tone that made her stomach twist. It was from the hospital administration. She was asked to come immediately to the supervisor's office. Something serious was wrong. The moment she heard that, her heart sank. She knew why. She walked through the hospital halls slowly, the usual buzz and noise feeling distant and strange. Everyone seemed to be focused on their work, but Angela felt like all eyes were secretly watching her. When she reached the office, she was greeted not with a smile, but with cold, stiff faces. Her supervisor, Ms. Grant, was waiting with the hospital's legal advisor and the HR manager. They wasted no time. The meeting started with Ms. Grant reading out the hospital's official complaint against her. "Angela, your actions during your last shift were against hospital policies. You bypassed triage procedures, moved a patient without doctor approval, and administered medical treatment without authorization. These are serious violations." She spoke like she was reading from a script, without emotion. Angela sat quietly, feeling the weight of their words. It felt unfair, but she stayed calm. "I know what I did was outside normal procedure," she said carefully, "but the patient was in danger. I acted to save his life." Ms. Grant's eyes didn't soften. "Rules are rules. We cannot make exceptions because we feel like it. This sets a dangerous precedent. Other staff might think they can act the same way, and it puts the hospital at risk legally." Angela's throat tightened. She wanted to explain more, but the HR manager cut her off. "Angela, after reviewing the incident and speaking with the medical team, the decision has been made to suspend you for 3 days without pay. This suspension is to remind staff of the importance of following protocols exactly." Her heart pounded. 3 days without pay meant a lot to her family. It was a punishment, a public one, and it felt like a slap in the face for doing what she believed was right. She looked down at her hands, trying to hold back tears. After the meeting, Angela returned to the nurses' station. Whispers followed. Her. Some nurses gave her sympathetic looks. Others avoided her eyes. No one said anything aloud, but Angela could feel the tension in the air. The hospital was like a machine, and she was suddenly the piece that didn't fit. Her co-workers had heard rumors about the suspension before she even left the office. Some felt sorry. Others worried this might affect their own work environment. Angela had been a respected nurse, someone who always helped others without complaint. Seeing her punished confused everyone. Angela called her husband that evening, her voice quiet but full of frustration. "I did what I had to do. It's not like I ignored the rules just for fun. That man could have died if I hadn't helped him." Her husband listened patiently. "I know, Angela. You always put others first. But sometimes the system isn't fair. Don't let this break your spirit." But Angela felt broken. She kept replaying the events in her mind. Was she really wrong? Should she have waited for a doctor even if it meant risking Henry's life? Her heart told her no. Her mind told her yes. It was a cruel conflict. Over the next few days, Angela stayed home, unable to work. Her usual routine vanished. Instead of waking up early and rushing to the hospital, she was stuck in the same four walls, thinking, worrying, and feeling isolated. Her phone rang less often. The world outside her door seemed indifferent. At home, her teenage daughter noticed the change. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked one afternoon, sitting beside her on the couch. Angela forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just some trouble at work." Her daughter looked worried but didn't press further. Angela didn't want to explain the complicated battle between compassion and bureaucracy to a teenager. She wanted to protect her from the harshness of adult problems. Meanwhile, the veteran Henry Collins was still in the hospital. Angela tried to find out about him through her contacts, but information was limited. No one seemed to know much about his condition or his story. The hospital treated him like any other patient, a nameless number on a chart. Angela's heart ached. She remembered the brief conversation they had, his tired eyes, his quiet dignity. She wondered if he was getting the care he deserved, or if he was being forgotten like so many other veterans who had given everything and then disappeared into the shadows. Her mind drifted back to stories her grandfather had told her about returning from war, how soldiers faced battles long after the fighting stopped, battles with pain, loneliness, and silence. How many had suffered in silence because no one understood or cared. Angela began researching veteran care, trying to understand more about the struggles they faced. She read articles, watched interviews, and reached out to veteran organizations. The more she learned, the more determined she became to do something bigger than just her hospital job. But at the hospital, the atmosphere was changing. Some staff started whispering that Angela's suspension was a warning to anyone who dared break rules, no matter how noble the reason. Others felt frustrated, believing the hospital had made a mistake. There were small signs of division and unease among the team. Angela received messages from a few co-workers, short notes of encouragement, quiet support. They told her to stay strong, that she was doing the right thing even if no one else saw it. It was a lonely comfort, but it meant a lot. Her friends outside work tried to cheer her up. They invited her out for coffee, movies, and dinners, but Angela often declined. She felt like the world had shifted beneath her feet, and she wasn't ready to move forward yet. One day, she sat in her living room, looking at old photos of her family. She remembered how her mother used to say, "You are the kind of person who makes the world better, Angela. Never lose that." Those words gave her a small spark of hope. She realized that even if the hospital punished her, even if the system seemed harsh, her compassion was not wrong. It was a strength. At night, Angela sometimes dreamed about Henry Collins. She saw him standing tall, saluting in his old uniform. She wished she could do more, not just for him, but for every forgotten veteran. Her suspension period ended slowly. The 3 days felt like weeks. When she finally returned to the hospital, she walked through the doors with a quiet determination. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to keep fighting. Angela's story was not just about rules and punishments. It was about the human spirit, the choice to care when it's easier not to, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when the world seems against you. Little did she know, her actions would soon catch the attention of someone very important, someone who could change everything. But for now, Angela focused on healing herself and preparing for whatever came next. Her suspension was a difficult chapter, but it was also the beginning of a journey that would touch many lives and remind everyone that behind every rule is a person who deserves kindness and respect. Angela's story teaches us that sometimes the greatest battles are not fought on the front lines, but in the quiet moments when one person decides to act with courage and heart. The hospital that afternoon was busy as usual. Nurses hurried between patients, doctors discussed cases in hushed tones, and the usual sounds of machines beeped steadily. Angela Reyes was back at work after her suspension, still feeling the weight of what had happened, but determined to keep doing her job the best way she could. She moved through the halls with quiet focus, trying to keep her mind on the patients and not on the whispers she heard behind closed doors. But then something unusual happened, something no one at the hospital could have expected. Around mid-afternoon, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of the hospital entrance. It wasn't just any car. It was large, polished, and had the kind of quiet power that made people stop and stare. Nurses in the nearby rooms noticed it first. "Look at that," one whispered. "That's a government vehicle." The SUV doors opened, and out stepped a man dressed in a sharp uniform decorated with shiny medals and insignia. His presence immediately commanded respect. It was General Marcus Langston, a 4-star general in the United States Army, one of the highest-ranking officers in the country. His reputation was well known, not just for his military achievements but for his leadership, discipline, and commitment to the men and women who served under him. The hospital staff had heard rumors about the general visiting, but no one was sure why. The atmosphere in the emergency room shifted instantly. Nurses paused in their work, doctors stopped talking, and patients looked around, sensing something important was happening. The security team at the hospital quickly made a path, clearing the way for General Langston to enter. Angela heard about the general's arrival from a colleague. She had never met him, but she knew the kind of impact a person like that could have. The hospital director and the top administrators hurried to meet him. Everyone waited, curious and tense. The general moved with confidence and purpose. His face was serious, but his eyes showed a deep kindness. After he arrived, he requested a private meeting with the hospital's administration. The CEO, the head nurse, and the supervisor all went to meet him in the boardroom. Staff members whispered among themselves, trying to guess the reason for his visit. Angela's curiosity was growing. She wondered if this was connected to the veteran she had helped days ago. She thought about Henry Collins and hoped everything was okay with him. As the meeting began, the general spoke with clear, calm authority. He explained why he was there. The veteran that Angela had helped, the old man with the faded military cap who had been ignored for hours in the waiting room, was none other than his younger brother. The room fell silent. No one expected this connection. The administrators exchanged surprised glances. Suddenly, the story Angela had lived through was no longer just a hospital incident. It was personal, real, and important. General Langston told them that his brother, Henry Collins, had served honorably for many years. After returning from war, he struggled with health issues, including PTSD and other complications. The family had been worried about him, but they never imagined that he would be left waiting for so long in an emergency room, ignored and alone. The general's voice softened as he spoke about his brother. "I understand hospitals have rules, and I respect them. But no veteran should ever be made to wait like this. No one who risked their life for their country should be forgotten. He then praised Angela by name, telling the administration how her quick thinking and compassion had likely saved Henry's life. This nurse acted when no one else would. She put his life before rules, and for that, I am grateful. The hospital leaders listened carefully. The general's presence and words carried weight that couldn't be ignored. It was a powerful reminder that behind every patient was a human being with a story, a family, and sacrifices. He then looked around the room and said something that made everyone think deeply. In the military, we value honor, duty, and courage. These values must also guide health care. Rules are important, yes, but so is humanity. Nurses like Angela remind us of that. The meeting lasted over an hour. The general asked for a full review of the hospital's policies regarding veteran care and patient prioritization. He requested more training for staff to recognize signs of critical health issues, especially for older veterans who may not speak up or demand attention. After the meeting, the general made a public statement praising the hospital's dedication, but urging them to improve how they care for veterans and other vulnerable patients. The media picked up the story quickly. Headlines praised Angela's bravery and highlighted the general's call for change. Back in the hospital, the atmosphere began to shift. Staff who had been critical of Angela's actions started to see her in a new light. The suspension seemed less justified. Many expressed regret that they hadn't supported her sooner. Angela herself felt a mixture of relief, pride, and humility. She hadn't done what she did for recognition or praise. She had only wanted to help a man in need. But now she realized her actions had sparked something bigger, a movement towards more compassionate care. That day, General Langston didn't just walk into the hospital as a high-ranking officer. He walked in as a brother, a family member, and an advocate for those who serve. His visit reminded everyone that behind every rule, there must be respect for the human heart. For Angela, it was the beginning of a new chapter. She felt seen, understood, and more determined than ever to fight for patients like Henry Collins. The hospital was beginning to change, slowly but surely, thanks to one nurse's courage and a general's powerful voice. And as the sun set that evening, Angela knew that sometimes the most unexpected moments, like the arrival of a four-star general, can turn the tide and bring hope where it is most needed. After General Marcus Langston's visit to the hospital and his heartfelt speech about his brother Henry Collins, things began to change. Not overnight, but steadily, with each passing day. The hospital, which had once been cold and strictly by the book, started opening its doors to new ideas, new respect, and most importantly, new compassion. But it was not an easy journey. Change never is. Angela Reyes, the nurse who had risked everything to help Henry, found herself at the center of this transformation. When she returned to work after her suspension, she was greeted with a mix of emotions. Some colleagues smiled at her, others avoided her, and a few simply nodded with quiet respect. The general's visit had made waves, and people were beginning to talk openly about what had happened. The hospital administration, under pressure from the public and the general himself, announced a new task force to review patient care procedures, especially for veterans and other vulnerable groups. Angela was invited to be part of this team. It was surprising, but she accepted without hesitation. She wanted to make sure that what happened to Henry would never happen again to anyone else. The task force meetings were intense. Doctors, nurses, administrators, and even a few veterans were involved. They discussed the existing hospital policies, the flaws in the triage system, and the lack of training about recognizing subtle signs of critical illness, especially in elderly and silent patients. Many staff members shared stories about patients who had slipped through the cracks because no one acted quickly enough. Angela spoke from her heart. She explained how Henry's situation had been ignored, how waiting lines and paperwork sometimes became barriers to urgent care. We have to see the person, Not just the patient number, she said. Sometimes, the quietest patients are the ones who need us the most. Her words touched many people in the room. Some doctors admitted that they were so busy and overwhelmed that they sometimes missed these signs. Others promised to pay closer attention. The hospital's head nurse, who had once been so harsh with Angela, started to see the situation differently. Meanwhile, Henry Collins's condition improved steadily. With proper care, the veteran regained his strength, and the hospital staff began to hear more about his life. He shared stories with other patients about his time in the military, the battles he fought, and the friends he lost. His quiet courage inspired many, including Angela. One afternoon, Angela visited Henry in his hospital room. The man who had once seemed so fragile now smiled warmly when he saw her. "You saved me," he said simply. Angela shook her head. "You saved yourself, by holding on. I just gave you a little help." Their friendship grew over the next weeks. Henry talked about his struggles after the war, the loneliness, the pain, the feeling of being forgotten. Angela listened carefully. She knew that healing was not just about medicine, but about kindness and understanding. Inspired by Henry's story and her own experiences, Angela began organizing workshops for hospital staff. These sessions focused on how to care for veterans with respect, how to recognize hidden symptoms, and how to balance rules with compassion. Veterans from the community were invited to share their stories, bridging the gap between medical staff and those they served. The hospital also launched a new program called Veteran Care Champions, where nurses and doctors volunteered to receive special training in veteran health issues. Angela became one of the leaders of this initiative. Her passion and dedication inspired others to join. Outside the hospital, the general continued his advocacy. He worked with local government and veteran organizations to improve healthcare policies for veterans statewide. His influence helped bring more funding, better resources, and greater awareness. The media kept following the story. News articles and TV programs featured interviews with Angela, Henry, and General Langston. They talked about the importance of empathy in healthcare and the need to listen to every patient's story. Their voices reached far beyond the hospital walls. Angela's life changed in many ways. She became more confident and outspoken. She found strength in her experiences and used them to help others. Her family noticed the difference too. Her daughter was proud of her mother's courage and dedication. However, not everything was easy. Some hospital staff still resisted the changes. Old habits die hard, and bureaucracy often slows progress. Angela faced criticism and skepticism from a few colleagues who thought she was making too much of a small incident. But Angela never gave up. She believed that every small step toward kindness and understanding made a difference. She reminded herself and others that the heart of nursing was not just science, but humanity. One day during a hospital-wide meeting, the CEO announced new policies that had been developed thanks to the task force's work. These included faster triage for high-risk patients, special attention to veterans, and ongoing training programs for all staff. The hospital pledged to become a leader in compassionate care. Angela felt a quiet pride as she listened. Her actions, once punished, had helped create real change. She knew the journey was far from over, but the future looked brighter. Henry Collins was discharged after a month in the hospital. Before leaving, he thanked Angela again. "You gave me more than medical care," he said. "You gave me hope." Angela smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "You gave me a reason to keep fighting." As Henry walked out of the hospital, supported by his family and the staff who had grown to respect him, Angela watched from the window. She thought about all the veterans out there who still needed help, and all the patients who deserved to be seen and heard. Her story was a reminder that sometimes courage means standing alone. Sometimes it means breaking rules to save a life. But most importantly, it means believing that everyone deserves dignity and care. The hospital had changed, but so had Angela. She had learned that true healing comes from the heart, and that one person's compassion can ripple out and touch many lives. And so, Angela Reyes continued her work, not just as a nurse, but as a champion for those who often had no voice, determined to make sure that no one would ever be left waiting alone. Again, after Henry Collins was discharged from the hospital, life began to settle down again, but not back to the way it was before. For Angela Reyes, the nurse whose courage had changed everything, the experience had opened a new chapter in her life. It was a chapter filled with challenges, hope, and determination. The changes at the hospital continued to grow. The new policies that were introduced thanks to the task force Angela was part of made a real difference. Nurses and doctors now had better training to recognize the needs of veterans and other patients who might not speak loudly but needed urgent help. The triage system became more flexible to allow quicker action in emergencies. Staff began to understand that rules were important but should never replace care and compassion. Angela was proud of these changes, but she also knew that the journey was far from over. Real change in any system took time. Old habits were hard to break, and sometimes people resisted because they feared new ways of doing things. But Angela remained strong. She was determined to keep pushing for better care for every patient. One day, a few months after Henry's discharge, Angela received a letter. It was from General Marcus Langston himself. The general thanked her once again for her bravery and kindness and invited her to attend a special ceremony honoring healthcare workers who had shown exceptional dedication to veterans. Angela was surprised and honored. She accepted the invitation and prepared to attend the ceremony. On the day of the event, she dressed in her uniform and felt a mixture of nerves and pride. When she arrived, she saw many nurses, doctors, and hospital staff from around the country. The room was filled with people who, like her, had fought quietly and bravely for their patients. General Langston spoke at the ceremony. He shared the story of Henry Collins and the nurse who refused to stand by when a life was at risk. He praised Angela's courage and reminded everyone that healthcare was about more than medicine. It was about heart and humanity. Angela was called to the stage to receive a special award. The applause filled the room as she accepted the honor. She looked out at the crowd, thinking about all the patients she had cared for and the family she loved. In that moment, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her actions had mattered. Her voice had been heard. After the ceremony, Angela spoke with other healthcare workers and veterans. They shared stories, struggles, and hopes for the future. Angela realized that she was part of a larger community, one that cared deeply and was working together to make healthcare better for everyone. Back at her hospital, Angela continued to lead the Veteran Care Champions program. The workshops and training sessions grew in popularity. More staff volunteered to learn how to better serve veterans. Angela worked closely with veteran organizations, bringing guest speakers and creating support networks for patients and their families. She also began advocating for better mental health support for veterans. She knew that many veterans suffered silently with PTSD and other challenges that were often invisible to others. Angela pushed for more resources, counseling, and community programs to help these heroes heal beyond the hospital walls. Angela's family supported her through it all. Her husband admired her strength, and her daughter was proud of her mother's courage and dedication. Angela made sure to balance her work and family life, knowing that caring for herself was important too. One afternoon, Angela received a visit from Henry Collins. He looked healthier and more energetic than when she last saw him. Henry thanked her again, but this time his words carried more hope. "Because of you, I'm not just surviving. I'm living. You helped me find a new beginning." Angela smiled warmly. "You did the hard work, Henry. I was just there to help." Their friendship remained strong, a reminder that sometimes the bonds formed in the hardest times can last a lifetime. As the years passed, Angela's story became an inspiration to many. Hospitals in other cities began adopting similar policies, and veteran care programs expanded nationwide. The media occasionally revisited the story, reminding people that behind every rule and protocol, there is a human life deserving respect and kindness. Angela continued to work as a nurse, always focused on her patients, always ready to speak up for those who needed a voice. Her journey taught her that one person's courage could spark change, that compassion was the most powerful medicine, and that standing up for what is right, no matter the cost, was always worth it. Her story is a reminder that heroes come in many forms. Sometimes they wear uniforms with medals and stars. Sometimes they wear scrubs and carry stethoscopes. And sometimes they are ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things. And so, Angela Reyes's story ends not with a grand finale, but with a quiet promise. A promise that care, courage, and kindness will continue to light the way for all who walk through hospital doors, seeking hope and healing.